Hello and welcome to Expected Grass. I'm here with my friend Diltsy and I've really done him dirty because I've given him like absolutely no preparation or indication of what we're going to talk about at all in kind of classic me fashion.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I know. I kind of realized I was trying to work out how to do the go live thing and then it was kind of happening before we had a chance to say anything about it. So I'm sorry about that, but how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, like you said, I guess a sort of baptism by fire for my first ever pod. You just chucking me in
I
with
think
no
that's
prep.
of this pod. We just kind of chat,
That's fine. That sounds
and
good to
so
me.
I think if you know what you're going to talk about, it doesn't really have the same feeling.
True.
So the first question I have for you really is, and you knew it was coming, is why is your team always bad?
This is the thing. I did worry that I was just kind of walking into a trap doing this, and this is what it was going to be. I guess this week, like people would probably say it's because I'm beholden to the projected points model known as FPL review. And, it's now finished. Like it's just completely washed. And none of us are ever going to score points like ever again.
It does seem that way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of does.
To bring the listeners in here on this niche little Twitter joke, I think you put a tweet up saying you wanted to have the kind of following where you would get people saying team bad every week. So I decided I would take up that mantle. There is a way to get team good, and it's to have 15 out of 15 the same as me.
I know, and we got really close last season. There was one time, right, where I think we were 14, 15.
Yeah, I think there
And
was like just a 4.5 striker different at some points, but
yeah, but still, yeah, I understand it doesn't count. We'll get there eventually, considering the amount of people that I tend to, have the same team as, or the kind of partnerships that I tend to be in with people playing the game.
I was I was going to say I'm a difficult one to match. I have a little tendency to go rogue.
You do have a little grass in you, a little grass on the shoes.
I don't know if it's grass. It's just like when you get sensitivity analysis, you can always go for like the slightly more fun option.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to sprinkle in a bit of vibes, a bit of fun, players that you actually are kind of interested in as well, right? Rather than just picking purely based on the data. Like I understand that compulsion. I've done it many times before as well.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is kind of funny though that we've never had the same team, given all the kind of discourse around analytics teams always being exactly the same.
Yeah, it doesn't actually happen as often as people think it does, right?
Yeah,
And when it does happen, it's usually not by kind of like chance, not by the, not just simply the case that we're using primarily the same tool, but it's kind of that actually, some people like playing in collaboration with each other. And there is, a kind of use and comfort to doing that. Yeah.
that's
Let's take
interesting.
it.
That's interesting. I mean, it also usually happens around wildcards. I would say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Yeah.
Talk to me about this playing in collaboration thing, because I don't think I'm made for it personally. But you and Anthony have had a long and tumultuous, I would say on off at this point, relationship. But you're currently back again. You're an item.
Well, one player different, actually.
Oh no.
Yeah. So for context for people that don't kind of know, um, I think for 4 seasons now, um, I have had for a majority of that time, I've had the same team as another fantasy football manager called Anthony FPL Simpson on Twitter. And that initially happened because we ended up on the same team around a wild card, and then we got kind of got talking after that. And then we just our ideas often just always seem to be in accordance with each other. We clearly generally like the same level of risk, and a kind of let's say, I'm trying to think of some of the other things that bring us together, really, and maybe it's like quite difficult to say because we just don't talk about it very often. It just kind of happens. We just talk about kind of, because we are obviously in group chats and we talk all the time about the game, and then we just end up on the same team. But what often happens, as has happened again, is that Anthony does something really stupid or forgets a deadline or just does something that means that our teams have to split. So for this, before this wild card, coming into it, we'd had the same team since the start of the season, and then we were chasing price rises, and he sold Pedro Porro by accident. And then it meant that the team that he didn't realize that he might end up in the wild card.
Okay, right, yeah.
Whereas I was always like, well, yeah, it's definitely going to be a possibility because Spurs are kind of coming up a lot further down the line, so you might just want to hold on to him. And so that happened, and so he was 0-1 short of the team that I eventually decided was going to be the best kind of team. And so, just so you know, what's going to happen now is that. So I think he has a Kanji, and I have Porro, and somehow Manuel Akanji is, over the next 4 or 5 game weeks, is going to score about 40 points more than Pedro Porro, because Anthony is just the FPL god's golden boy. I guarantee that I am the superior manager to him. Yet somehow every season he beats me by a ridiculous margin. It's for someone not so mentally strong, it'd be really demoralizing. I'd be a broken man. I'd have stopped playing this game. But then it does also kind of illustrate just how it's a good illustration for me of how silly this game is and how you shouldn't really take it very seriously, at least the outcomes.
That's very true. That's very interesting. So it's kind of like a natural kind of gravitational pull.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. But then last year, I think on the wildcard, you went kind of quite separate structures. How did you feel being a lone island in the big bad world of FPL?
I kind of enjoyed it, but it probably, because the reason that we split that time, because it was around the time it was game week 8 wildcard, and I went no Haaland, and he went for Haaland, and I think that was largely around risk preference. And I know I said we probably do have a similar kind of risk preference, but I think I maybe skew more towards like a kind of higher risk, let's say, strategy. And so that's kind of like what broke us up. And I think one of the problems with not being, not having Anthony to calm me down last season was that at times I probably did crank up the risk a little bit, to a degree that wasn't. I think it was fine. I do think it was fine, but it did just mean that it was quite a volatile season for me, in a season when analytics actually obviously performed incredibly, across the board, in terms of range of outcomes for analytics-based managers. It was obviously an exceptional season. And I was a little bit on the outside of that for various reasons.
Yeah, I think I was also on the outside of that, which was quite annoying. It's quite annoying when your friends do well.
I'm usually really happy for people, because it's nice to see, players employing solid strategies that may be like slightly different to your own, but doing well. I am genuinely, and I think it's really important in this game to kind of cultivate that as an attitude, right? To like celebrate other people's victories. But yeah, last season, it did sting a little bit. It's like you wanted to just be in on the party, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like everyone else gets to go have fun, and you're grounded essentially in like
Exactly.
5 digits, and only just for me.
Oh, so it wasn't that bad then.
Well, yeah, but the first time I got into 5 digits was on the last day, so it was a bit of a slog.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. But we got somewhere half decent at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in a season of bad, exceptionally bad variants like that, I'd take that as a win.
Yeah. I mean, also if it kind of evens out, then like the variance is kind of less bad as well, right? So
yeah, I'd had an exceptional season the year before, so I couldn't really complain too much.
yeah, that's fair. He can still complain. I think. I think it's that's absolutely part of the game and part of the joy of the game. I think is doing the complaining.
Yeah, I think Twitter is always a more fun place after a game week like the one we've just had, right?
Yeah, it's pure chaos, and
Yeah.
no one likes it when everyone's done well.
No, it's boring. It's really
really
boring.
It's really boring, and then it's like it's just different like levels of well, and it's just like a horrible dick measuring contest.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this season.
Yeah, me too, actually. Despite the kind of variance so far.
Yeah.
Talk me through your kind of season so far. So, like, talk me through how you approached it with the new rules, and have things gone to plan? Have things gone like doing something different to what you thought?
So in terms of approach to the new rules, I probably did. I'm always trying to build robust, sort of long-sighted teams generally. But I think for the start of this season, I was reasonably certain that I was going to wild card early because of the lack of value in the wild card. This season because of the rolling mechanism, and then also because there seemed to be a lot of uncertainty around around teams, how they were going to set up, how they were going to perform at the start of the season. I think because there was a lot of change of managers at clubs that we were potentially kind of interested in. Liverpool and Chelsea, are the first two that kind of come to mind. And so my thinking was just be a little bit more short-sighted, because I'm probably going to want to kind of respond quite early with the wild card to that the information that we get about certain teams and especially about minutes. I think for the start of this season it was a particularly difficult season in some ways to predict how teams exactly were going to set up and what things were going to look like. So yeah, that was the plan, and that's exactly what I've ended up doing in terms of wildcarding game week 6. In terms of how bad at least my X-Men's predictions and things like that were going to be, it turned out to be not great. And so I had to make a transfer every single week, responding to some kind of issue. So that was unexpected and not ideal. And so that was like a little bit different. I did intend to, kind of try and roll as much as possible, like everyone else did. I think had the typical kind of wildcard 6 plan if you were on Haaland like me, where I was planning to get to game week 5 to be able to do a double switch to Salah somehow, not necessarily selling Haaland, but someone else. And yeah, that also didn't happen for various reasons. But that actually worked out quite nicely because I ended up captaining Son, and that was quite a conscious sort of choice after game week 3. I think I had kind of locked that in as what I was going to be doing. And so in terms of outcomes, the Son captaincy aside, and that game week, it's just been similar to I think what a lot of people, a lot of kind of analytically minded people have experienced, which is, and for me, even with Haaland, that generally it's been a lot of drops, and I'm just kind of I've just kind of been lingering in the millions with lots of other people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think we analyzed it pretty similarly at the start of the season because the teams that were kind of similar to yours, it was with an early wildcard in mind and then trying to get around to Salah. And I think I just kind of went the other way on how much juice I think you can get out of a wildcard. And then everything else kind of follows from there. So I think if you're not going for the early wildcard, the Salah draft made more sense.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of too fragile to get around otherwise, I think.
Yeah, I think my thinking with it was that kind of shifted me towards Haaland was, I looked at it, and if I was wildcarding early, if I wanted to follow that strategy, I anticipated having Salah at the point that it would be most crucial to have him anyway, in my opinion, in terms of captaincy. So I was like, well, I'm getting the kind of best of both worlds. I'm going to captain Haaland when I want to captain Haaland, and then I'm going to get the week where, there's a clear kind of discrepancy in expected points between the two of them, and you want kind of Salah. And obviously, it didn't really work out that way. But yeah, I quite enjoyed the path that I ended up on. When you can have like a captain, with decent expected value at, kind of, and 1% of the field is captaining them that week, that's just like a dream, really. Even if you are up against however 100% or whatever EO.
Yeah, but that's the fun of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
We really try to like generate some stakes because if we can generate like enough positive value stakes, like that's going to help us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's fun though. Are you finding the new rules like how you expected? I think we all kind of had ideas of how it would play out, but now we're a few weeks in. Is it changing your strategy in a way that you hadn't expected? Now you're kind of like spent some time with it.
It's difficult for me to say, isn't it, because of the situation I found myself in where I've had to use the transfers. I think, so I had been playing Fan Team last year when they introduced a similar rule. With that, though, it is unlimited rolling. So I'd had some experience of it anyway. And one of the kind of standout things that I found, at least, and it's difficult to know, isn't it, how season specific these things are, because obviously what I'm about to say could just be a kind of quirk of that particular season. But one of the things that I tended to find is that you rolled a little less than, or at least because I was using a solver for that as well, and the solver kind of wanted you to roll a little bit less than I anticipated. And so you kind of don't really, like, I don't think at any point that season I got to, rolling 5, maybe not even 4 FTs, even around double game weeks and stuff. You were still kind of like stacking them up. But I think the maximum that I ever found myself rolling was about 3. And I know Sertalp did some tests on this. Obviously, he simmed the season, kind of looking at when we were going to use transfers and things like that. And he found a similar thing that generally, kind of 3 is the maximum that you kind of get to in terms of stacking of transfers.
Yeah.
But like, what's, because obviously you've rolled quite a bit, right? You've managed to bank some transfers and stuff. That's that right?
I rolled 2 and then I've spent one of those 2.
Right.
So I rolled in 2 and 4. I started with 500,000 in the bank, and then that allowed me to do Nkunku straight up to Eze with 1 transfer. That was quite nice. And then spent 1 on Isak to Solanke, 5, and then 2 in 6. Minter to Mboma, which is fine, and then probably my first blunder of the season. We got there with Muniz to Archer, followed by Archer benching, which was that was my fault. But hey, that's okay. I think he can just sit there. the way I looked at that, it was if it's downside, then it's like I have 500,000 more tied up than a 4.5 striker. Okay.
Yeah.
And if he keeps the shirt, then like I have a guy who maybe is still on penalties, maybe not. And like starting up front for 5 mil, and that seems like good upside. So I got the downside, but it's okay. I can probably just leave them there.
Yeah, I think so. Because when you brought him in, did you have much? Were you planning to play him at all over the horizon much? Or
Not much. He was like sub one quite a lot, and then I played him this week because of João Pedro's injury.
Right.
So I guess it depends on what happens with him. If a free transfer is going to be needed on one of them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the kind of the rule stuff, let's kind of get into the weeds of how you value a free transfer, because obviously how much solvers are going to tell you to roll, it's massively dependent on the numbers that you give it as what the value of a transfer is. So, and that's not an easy thing to estimate, especially given that it's like it responds to the particular situation you're in as well. So how do you kind of like think about these things when you're making your week to week decisions?
So I am following, the kind of degraded numbers that I think I'm trying. Who did the testing on that? Someone did the testing on that in the analytics Discord, but I can't remember if it was Sertout or if someone else did it. I don't want to like miscredit.
I'm not sure either.
Okay, yeah, I can't remember, but whoever did that, thanks. And yeah, I'm kind of let's say ceding to the judgment of my betters, let's say, with that. And so yeah, I'm applying that rule. I haven't well, I will apply that rule when I get the chance. I haven't been able to do it yet, obviously. But yeah, and I will, when I have transfers banked, I will lower the FT value. And I will do that incrementally. And then obviously if I use a transfer, kind of like increase it again. I think that is going to be the best. Again, it's one of those things that it's not in my kind of capacity to test. I'm really not a mathematical person. I'm learning as I kind of like go. I'm a much better sort of place than I was like a couple of years ago. Like I've learned a lot, but it's really not my background. I just understood that, and this comes from playing a lot of poker and playing other kind of fantasy sports. I just understood that if you want to kind of the best way, the best way to optimize your chance of doing well in these games is ultimately to introduce, a kind of systematic and mathematical approach. But in order to do that, I'm reliant on a lot of people who aren't me, and I appreciate them greatly.
Okay, interesting. And so you kind of keep that constant no matter the kind of like particular FPL situation. You just leave the numbers kind of like the same throughout the season.
In what sense do you mean?
The transfer value.
Oh yeah. I think that's a good question. I'm trying to think about what situations would arise where you might want to think about things like a little bit differently. I suppose you might want to do something. I'm trying to think here. If you I guess if you had a situation where it was possible like the week after, this might work during kind of like a transfer window or something, perhaps. If you knew that you were going to get a certain amount of information by holding off on the transfer, then maybe then you want to raise it. So you don't want to, you kind of don't want to use it through a period where there is kind of going to be volatility in terms of again like squad composition and things like that. that might be worthwhile. That's the only kind of thing that immediately comes to mind. Did you have something particular in mind?
Okay, yeah, that's kind of interesting. In my head, I'm always a little uncertain as to what the transfer value is, but I know that if I'm in a situation where I think I'm going to need to use transfers, a lot of transfers, like soon, and the solver will be like carrying fewer in those positions, then it's more valuable for me to roll now because I'm going to be in a more fragile position to do those key moves. If I don't, then if I do. And so I kind of want the solver to be able to pick that up. And it adjusts like how much it wants to roll based on what the plan is going to be. So it's tricky. You can do it. In my solver, I set it up to value the carried transfers directly. So you kind of get a little bonus to your game week score for every like transfer you're not using in that game week. And that is okay, but it's quite sensitive to what you choose. Because like rolling a transfer now affects all of your future carry positions, and so you can end up stacking up these 0.2s over multiple weeks and like get some stupid free transfer values. So you have to be a bit careful about it. But I think I've got something that's okay. But I'm always kind of conscious that I could just be putting garbage in and getting garbage out.
Yeah, it feels like one of those things that still, and there's a number of things like this, right? That just still feel a bit more like art than science. You know, we're just messing around. You know, we're experimenting. We're trying to find things still, which is good.
Yeah, it's good. I'm glad it's not a solved game. I'm also glad it's not quite just an X-Men's game, but it is kind of a little bit of who can build the best solver game.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think as this season's demonstrated, yeah, the X-Men's are kind of everything. You know, they should be the thing, I think, with this game that you focus on first, because quite simply you need players on the pitch to score points, and the longer they're on the pitch, the more likely they are to score points. It's just, you know, it's sometimes quite simple, this game. But in terms of, you know, you saying, yeah, that I still think there's going to be other developments. I think there's going to be, you know, kind of other things that make the game more interesting. I hope I'm around long enough that the game becomes as competitive as something like a lot of NFL based games are now. Because I think that's when things will get quite interesting. Again, in terms of what then becomes the optimal strategy, I think it'll be a very different environment.
Okay, and are you thinking about kind of risk things there?
Yeah, definitely. And probably that's when simulation becomes even more important. I think, and I think that's the next sort of frontier. You see that with other games, right? Like we're a little bit behind, especially in FPL, like in fantasy football on some other sites and things like that. There are people doing some really interesting things, but FPL is like just a little bit behind, just because data and analytics came to it a bit later than it did to NFL fantasy. And yeah, I think Trout, James went on the Wire podcast and had that absolutely like excellent pod. And one of the things that he talked about is kind of the way that his kind of attitude has shifted about the game, and how we should approach it and things like that, in terms of, and I think I've gone through a similar been on a similar journey where I think I'd got like a little bit complacent at one point and was thinking, this is it now. This is how we're going to be playing for forever. Essentially, we're done. We're just going to maximize expected points all the time. We're just going to be continually doing that, and that's how we're going to play the game. And and we'll just keep generally doing well at the game. And yeah, I think in the last definitely like 2 years, my attitude has changed like a little bit. I think especially as the game gets more competitive, there are other things that we need to be thinking about. And yeah, risk profile is a major one of them. And I think as well, like a couple of seasons ago, I was mostly playing, kind of ownership agnostic, and that's been a real kind of like shift now, where I think about ownership a lot, and I think it's actually quite important, to how how generally we should go about playing the game. I think it should be like factored into our decision making quite a bit. Maybe not now so much, but certainly later in the season.
Yeah, I think I agree with you if you have a clear like kind of cutoffs in your preference over different ranks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And otherwise, like, yeah, just go ahead and like maximize your expected points. Like, don't worry about it. In terms of like how you personally apply risk to your team, are you risk seeking or are you trying to like reduce the risk? Like, what's your personal preferences given like where you are in general?
I think generally I'm trying to increase the risk a majority of the time, and I'm certainly constantly kind of like seeking it out. I'm like looking for the opportunities. It was like when the Son captaincy as an option kind of came along, popped up. It came along because I think it was Adam Armstrong. Adam Armstrong obviously got dropped. And so there was a decision to be made about whether, if I wanted to still be able to bring in Salah, I needed to roll a transfer that week. And I could have done that, given up some short-term kind of EV and then probably just gained it back, by still doing, a kind of double switch to Salah. But when I saw that there was the opportunity instead to, bring in, I think it was João Pedro, which again turned out to be a fantastic move. And then, you'd captain Son, and you can generally kind of predict. I think we can predict quite accurately how a lot of people are going to play the game. We can predict who's going to be captained, kind of like week to week, and certainly after a game week, who the main transfers are going to be, and things like that. And so, in my mind, I was like, well, Mohamed Salah is going to be by far and away the most captain player that week. Son wasn't too far off him for, expected points at that point. The gap obviously widened a little bit later. But yeah, it just seemed like a good opportunity. To kind of engage with some risks. And I'm kind of just constantly looking for like little things like that. Did it last season with everyone was on double Arsenal defense, and I consciously went for double Arsenal midfield at one point, to just widen the kind of distribution of outcomes and, play around with volatility, partly because it's fun. Got to admit, it's not just about playing optimal. It's just enjoyable. It's just a bit more, makes the game a bit more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's why we were so bored last year when everyone had the same team, because you're not even playing the game.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Does the like there's kind of two ways that you can take risks, right? There's one where you do things which are pretty short horizon. So you'll move for Son just before a wild card, like it only has like a 1 week kind of like impact on your team. Same things with like seeking out close captaincies, also very short horizon. Obviously, doesn't impact the like your week going forward. And there's a kind of bigger picture ways of seeking risk. So you take like a close line, which is very different to everyone else, knowing that you're going to end up then making like different moves down the line as well, which are also going to like increase the risk that you're taking against the field. How do you think about those two? do you have a preference between them? Do you just like give it all to me, or is one better than the other for you?
The first one's certainly easier, right?
Yeah.
You know, kind of week to week, and I think is generally how I'm finding risk a majority of the time. I think how a lot of people are kind of finding risk a lot of the time. But I definitely do seek out the other one. Like I said, that you know, the double Arsenal mids was around the time when Richarlison was just going, you know, kind of absolutely mad as well. Had that really great run, and you know, so I think the top line on review for me when I, you know, went to make that decision was to bring him in and to bring Saliba in, and I decided to not take that path and to get Odegaard, and I can't remember who the other. Oh, and Foden. I got Foden really early before a lot of other people did. Yeah, for like one of his hat tricks. So that worked out. Eventually worked out well, but Richarlison carried on scoring, you know, a sublime, you know, like amount of points. And I think with that one, it's worth saying, like, I didn't, you know, make that decision on the basis that I didn't think Richarlison was a good pick, or that Richarlison wasn't going to carry on doing what he was doing, that he didn't have good projections. Obviously, I could see that it was my top line, you know, on review, and it wasn't anything to do with, you know, me thinking like, oh, he's overperforming or something like that, which I think is sometimes how you know, you take a leverage position against a player, right? Because you know, you think, oh, this isn't going to continue or something. It wasn't that. It was, you know, it was purely that I thought, well, the majority of people are doing this, and if I want to, yeah, you know, widen the distribution of my outcomes and, you know, increase rank volatility, then that was going to be the kind of best way to do it. I can't remember where I was ranked at the time, but, you know, I was clearly not that satisfied with it, and so I decided, well, I can afford, you know, perhaps to drop a bit more here for the potential gain of actually having, you know, like a kind of huge differential ultimately, you know, on a majority of the kind of player base at the time.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Do you have a kind of like mental amount of EV that you're willing to pay for a certain amount of risk, and at certain points in the season?
Well, I remember because Trout was asked this, wasn't he, on the
Yeah.
wire?
I know. I took this one to you as well. I was inspired by Praz.
Yeah, he gave a very, he's the mathematician, right? So he gave a very precise number. He did actually say he knew what it kind of was. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm just out here, you know, like vibing.
Nice.
No, there's not a really specific, yeah, kind of mathematical number to it. I'm just playing around. Yeah. So no is the answer, I guess. Even with captaincy and stuff. I do, like, I understand the maths of it, you know. You know, I can obviously work out, you know, what the probability is if I you know, I kind of go against stuff. So sometimes I do that, but yeah, but generally that's another one that's just more vibes.
Okay, that makes sense. And another one to try and like maybe extract some precision on is like what is your kind of objective function of your rank? Like, what are your
I'm
preferences? What are you aiming for in terms of how you prioritize your?
Yeah, I guess I think I'm always playing for like top 1k. I
Okay.
think I'm looking, you know, to really, you know, hit those kind of heights. I'm not kind of, you know, I say that and then I'm like, I understand generally what my kind of like expectation can be from, you know, the way that I play and stuff like that. And so I understand, you know, the level of risk that I can take on that is going to shift me like really far outside of what would still seem, you know, kind of reasonable and okay in a season. But I'm definitely not one of those people who it's kind of like 10k or bust or whatever, that it's, you know, you want to kind of have a yeah, like a, you're after kind of like a respectable, I want to, you know, I want to maintain my place in the Hall of Fame, you no, because I know there are people that play like that, and it's like that's absolutely fine, you know. And with you know, if that's what you're looking to do, you probably don't want to take on quite as much risk. You know, and I know there are people, yeah, as well, who you know, are content creators and things like that, and they understand that their livelihood is somewhat based on them, you know, being able to, you know, get these repeated kind of decent, you know, kind of finishes and things like that. And if that's what you're kind of like after, then yeah, you know, you probably don't need to take on quite so much risk. Whereas I'm a bit more bang or bust. I think probably because I'm not, you know, I'm not anywhere to be seen on the Hall of Fame rankings or anything like that, because of, you know, because I came to analytics early, but I came to playing the game well late. You know, like I have a you know, a rank history where I was just out there, you know, as a very casual kind of like player of the game, and so, you know, it would take me too long probably to you know, reach the those heights. So I'm just gonna have some fun instead.
Yeah, I mean, you're caught now. There's no way you're escaping. You'll be here long enough that you'll get there.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. You say that. We'll see. I nearly didn't play this season.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, so I you know, I haven't really told like that many people about this, and I don't think, yeah, I don't think, yeah, really, you know, yeah, I haven't said this to many people. So, but yeah, I'm playing a lot of fantasy sports now. I'm playing a lot of, yeah, for people that don't know, you know, like I'm a semi-professional gambler, and you know, I play a lot of these games for money. Um, and I've kind of stopped playing a lot of the other free stuff, um, because partly because I didn't have the time for it, and you know, for me, the enjoyment with a lot of games like this is, you know, it really is all about the, you know, the planning, and it's all about, you know, trying to solve this interesting kind of like problem. And if I don't have the time to do that, like if I'm not going to have the time, you know, to be really invested in it, and you know, to do the amount of kind of solving, especially, and research that I want to do, then there's not much point. But I'm still here. I think with this game, really, to be really honest, it's kind of like the friendships and things like that that I've developed around it that are keeping me playing. Because it's just, you know, there's just a great group of people around, I think, playing it, and yeah, I enjoy their company. So I guess I'm gonna stay playing this game if I want to
Yeah,
have anything to talk to them about.
I agree. I think that's why everyone kind of who retired recently kind of got roped back in. So like Chase retired,
Yeah,
he's
it's true.
playing again. Jamie Werogue, he retired and supposedly is retired still, but he plays with his friend.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think you just want to chat about FPL ultimately. It's quite fun
yeah,
because of the
yeah.
people for sure.
Definitely.
Okay. What are you gonna do this week? Roll? I'm assuming straight after work hard.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't even talked about Bruno Fernandes yet.
No, we haven't.
Because we haven't talked about Bruno.
I mean, what does that say, really?
Yeah, true. Yeah, actually, I don't. Yeah, maybe we just shouldn't. Especially, yeah, I don't think I want to talk about him as a fantasy football asset right now and whether he's valuable or not.
He's fine.
Yeah, because he is. He just is.
Yeah.
You know, all signs apart from points, which don't really mean anything, point to him being great, and also the fact that he's broadly undervalued. You know, that should factor into our decision making as well, because that makes him even better. Yeah, so that's that on that. But yeah, because I mean, yeah, what a hilarious outcome. Yeah, because his red card has been rescinded. he will stay, and I'll get the role. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
It
What
is
about
good.
you?
It is good. I like if Bruno was suspended for 3 games, it was going to be like a right kerfuffle for my team. I would have ended up
Same.
probably somewhere like Bowen, which I don't think is a value frontier piece really, or awkwardly going to Rogers, but like missing out on value now. It's probably a transfer I want to reverse, so it's really costing me 2. It was horrible. Because the whole point of Bruno Fernandes is that you can leave him.
Yeah.
And so that getting reversed is really nice. I would like I'd like a second brain from you on the line I'm considering to see whether
Okay.
I'm. It's one that I mentioned on the previous pod, which is the free hit 9. So I have a yes kind of standard Salah team. It's in pretty good shape. João Pedro is the only like flag. Archer is a fire, but not a massive one, because he can probably just stay there. And the solver is probably really just wants me to skip Haaland unless I wildcard in 9 or 10. If the hokey cokey is awkward because you basically do the same 2 transfers to get Haaland in and then reverse him and 10 immediately.
Yeah.
And so this kind of feels like what a free hit is for. Tell me your thoughts. And then the idea would be to wildcard in 18 or somewhere kind of
Right.
like down
Yeah.
that end.
Yeah.
Go on.
No, I think it could be really good. Yeah. No, because yeah, you haven't used triple captain or anything yet, have you? You didn't, yeah, because you're on the Salah team, of course not. Yes, you've still got that in the bag, and we really don't know what this mystery chip is going to be. So as has already been discussed like quite a bit, it's difficult if you've got all the chips. It's difficult to know exactly when you're going to use them, and if really it's going to be possible to use them in a double game week anyway. And you know that's the week. When I was looking at, so I looked at Nomium drafts on wildcard, and I would definitely probably preferred to do that. I think the Son doubt kind of killed it as an option, I think. And with that strategy, yeah, it's 9's the one you kind of like look at with a bit of trepidation, ultimately.
Yeah. You get awkward things like Foden captain and Prey.
Yeah, it's like as I've said, I think that we absolutely should be searching out risk, but you really need to be careful and be mindful about the level of risk that you're kind of taking on, and that feels like one where you're just not that could be pretty disastrous, I think, as a sort of risk play, because it's just you're going to be so far away on the captaincy, at least, from the probability of a good outcome against Haaland, really. So yeah, I like it, and I think especially because yeah, you can hope that you're kind of going to get a leak or something like that as well, and then there's the possibility that you you get 1 or even 2 other Man City midfielders. So yeah, I think it's really viable. Yeah, I've seen it being kind of teased, and I'm kind of you have my support.
Okay, nice. Yeah, in terms of later in the season, I think the thing that's different is we have no large blank because there's no quarterfinal FA Cup like clash for the Premier League this year. And then that means we have 1 fewer transition. So last year we had like the Carabao Cup final and the resulting double, the quarterfinal and the resulting double, and then the semis and the resulting doubles. And this year we only have 2. So I'm thinking for the big double, you essentially dead end into the blank wildcard out bench boost in the double. And then you just have to be able to stack enough free transfers to navigate the Carabao Cup. blank double essentially, which I think if the free hit 9 like gives me like a robust line and a wild card in 18, to then say I can hopefully stack some transfers by 25, 26, like seems okay, given that like that kind of covers pretty much that whole stretch in terms of like should be quite robust. Obviously stuff will happen, but there's not too much penciled in that needs doing.
Yeah.
So that feels okay. And then yeah, like you say, the mystery chip is a real it's a real head scratcher, isn't it? I'm kind of hoping that we'll know what it is by the time wildcard 18 or so comes around, because then
Yes.
maybe you compare it, and that's kind of like some optionality value potentially.
Yeah, you'd hope so.
You would hope
But
so,
yeah, I
but
can't
who knows?
remember what. Yeah, I can't remember what the initial, kind of information that they released about that was. I swear, didn't they say that it was for the second half? So that's like really close to the second half, right? So
Yeah, if you click on it, it says it can be played from January 2025. So that would be what,
right,
20,
yeah,
20 or
okay,
21 or something.
yeah, that's 20. So yeah, 18, surely.
But
Yeah,
then I don't know, maybe I could also see them just announcing it like immediately after the 19 deadline is gone and no one can play a wildcard. Like you can just see it, can't you? You
yeah,
hold your card to 18 in the hope that this comes, and then immediately it's like 11:30 or 10:31 or something.
yeah. It would be very FPL Towers. We've been
Yeah,
here many times before. Yeah,
absolutely. It would be absolutely classic.
yeah. Another, as we said earlier about taking the game seriously, I think another reason not to take the game too seriously in terms of the outcomes is exactly, yeah, FPL Towers' general management of the entire operation.
Yeah, although I will give them kudos this year. This year, I think they've
Yeah,
nailed it. They've nailed it.
prices, yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I think the transfer changes as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It makes the game a lot more dynamic and interesting. Obviously, opens up way more branches in terms of paths. Yes, I agree. Yeah, and I think though the early part of the season, and especially like the game week that's just followed, people are just having to come to terms with the reality of what that means, though, in terms of the variance involved in the game, and they're really struggling with that out there. I think.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's like everyone complains they want the teams to be different, and then when the teams are different, everyone's like, "Oh my god, everyone's swinging." It's like, yeah, of
Yeah.
course. This is the fun,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's going to be on tilt for basically most of the season. I think is how this is going to go. How do you deal with that? How do you stop yourself making stupid decisions, and just because I know that even a lot of people who are pretty analytical in the way they play the game on Wildcard 6, they just couldn't bring themselves to get Bruno Fernandes, even though, I don't know, when I had a look at some Wildcard 6 runs, he was just like over 90%. He was a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think more than some people would like to admit, they were kind of possibly influenced by some ideas and biases that they shouldn't have been on that one, I think. But I
What's the
can, I can understand it, just being like, this just isn't kind of, I say I can understand it. Like, I can understand it being like, this just isn't fun. But then for me, it's like, just because we haven't had fun so far doesn't mean the fun's not around the corner. It's like my kind of, attitude with him. You just have to keep reminding yourself of that. But to answer the kind of, the general question, I guess, what do I want to say? I guess, I guess what I should say is that so as I mentioned, I'm a semi-professional gambler. I've played poker for a long time now, and in my um, development as a poker player, that has involved attending seminars with a mental game coach. and I do spend a lot of time specifically for poker and other fantasy sports more than kind of FPL, but it influences it. Thinking and working on the mental side of my game for those games, because it's really important, because obviously you can lose a lot of money otherwise. You can get yourself in trouble, and obviously that's really not what you want to do. So I think you need to take the time to take care of your mental health. And so I guess that's the answer, is that I've done a lot of work on it. I've had, let's say, the fortune of being able to attend seminars with one of the best mental game poker coaches in the world, like Francois Hamel, and I've just worked on it. There were lots of, I think, and still there are lots of types of tilt, lots of biases that I'm kind of like prone to as well, and I've had to learn that they're especially the things that can trip me up. My biggest tilt is something called entitlement tilt. I think that was what I used to fall into quite a bit, especially with poker, and I had to really work on it. And that's do you want me to explain?
I'd love to explain what it is, and then also what was the thing which kind of like helped the most in kind of fighting back at that.
What, fighting back against entitlement tilt? Or so entitlement tilt is basically the best way to describe it is you develop the idea that because you've put in all the work, you've done all the studying, with poker, all the, well, let's bring it to FPL actually. You have, you've looked at all the data, you've researched the X minutes, you've done everything right, and so you believe that you are entitled to good outcomes, and you get annoyed when people who you perceive as having not put in the level of work that you've put in do well.
This is what happens when you see I get a good game week and you don't.
Precisely, absolutely. Yeah, this is how it started. This is actually how it started. This is why I had to go and get a mental game coach.
I'm sorry I drove you to professional help.
Well, it worked, so it's working. Yeah.
Okay, and then what was the thing that was most helpful for you?
I think now I'm just, so I guess one of the things that Francois Hamel kind of pushes you to understand is that really that these games, and they don't owe you anything. They really don't. No matter how much effort you put in, sometimes for very sustained periods of time as well, longer than you would like to imagine, you're going to lose. And actually, a majority of the time with these games, you're going to lose. That's how it works. Majority of the time, your players are going to blank. You're going to see way more twos than you're going to see even fucking fives and sixes a lot of the time. That's just how it is. And you just kind of have to try and accept that. And again, I think focus on process and do things that allow you to be focused on kind of process and things like that. I think I hadn't actually thought about this before, but I guess with FPL, I don't update after the game week anymore. I don't share my scores and things like that. That was a conscious choice that I made a while back ago now. I don't often really check my rank after the game week either. Sometimes I like check my rank, right before I do my like team reveal, because I remember, I always put it on, kind of for whatever reason on the end of that. It's probably not even necessary there. But yeah, and I think that is sort of, in some ways, like a conscious decision to try and avoid entitlement tilt, because I'm not really on Twitter on Sundays either. I was this Sunday because I knew it would be hilarious. But I tend to avoid, all of the scores and things like that. So maybe I'm not really as over it as I am. Maybe I'm just putting it in like a little box and hiding it away somewhere. But I think it helps. That element of things just does help with you being process oriented, which is the most important thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's difficult to do when you keep hitting bad beats. Yeah, okay. That's super interesting. I think if it's working, it's working, right? I don't think you need to worry about a box.
Yeah, no. It can just stay there forever.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much all I've got in my head. Do you have anything else in your head that we didn't talk about? Burning FPL things?
No, I think we covered everything. I think we touched on the volatility of this season. I guess that's just sort of a point that I'd reiterate to anyone, kind of listening this, is to just sort of steel yourself. This is how it's going to be. It's just going to be a volatile season, and to try and enjoy that, to try and lean into it a little bit when you can. Like I said, with risk profile and things like that. Because if you're consciously kind of doing it, if you're consciously engaging with it rather than trying to kind of mitigate it, always in some ways feels a little bit like you have a touch of control over what's going on, even when it's bad, because you knew that was a possibility.
Yeah, you kind of feel at least that you're going with the vibes of the season. If you're trying to cover up everything, you'll drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, and you can't do it. It's not gonna work.
Do you think kind of a last one before we kind of close this up? Do you think this season will be more difficult for newer players who haven't had a season of a structure like this before? Because I remember we've definitely had one in the last few years when we had Hazard, Kane, Salah, etc. There was about 5 premiums similar to this that were like priced pretty similarly, not with their outlier 15, but
yeah,
it was a similar season, and you could only have kind of 3 out of 5 main pieces all the time. It'll be harder for newer players, or I think it's just they'll work it out.
Do you know how I think it's going to be especially hard on? Is and and just thinking about this is really funny in a lot of ways. This season is just going to be really funny, and so far I think has just been hilarious in a lot of ways. And one of them is that, of course, last season was this outlier, ultimately, in terms of variance for the analytics template and analytics players broadly. And so obviously you had this influx this season of new players to analytics, and also the analytics Discord, in terms of the number of members and stuff like that, has just been on this exponential rise. And so you've got all of these new players to analytics who are using a review for the first time and trying to think about the game in a different way. They've seen how successfully it was last season, and they're all currently sat probably at like between 3 and 5 million, and it's been a slog. And they're probably just thinking like, it wasn't supposed to be like this.
Yeah, and the classic thing will be they'll give up on analytics at the moment where the variance would have turned.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing. The whole point of this process is that it's about the long term. And you have to, you're going to have, it's going to have bad, you're going to have probably bad whole seasons. You're going to have, sometimes it's not going to work, but just because it doesn't work over a short amount of time doesn't stop it being, the best strategy for success. And so, I think it's going to be hard for people like that. And so if anyone, is listening to this who has made that change this season, I might just say, like, stick it out.
I would say give up
because it'll be worth it. You say, well, you see, because I want the game to get to the point where it's like really difficult, and so I want people to stick it out.
I would say analytics clearly doesn't work.
Review is just washed. It's
It is.
over.
It's just a random number generator.
Yeah, it was all a mirage the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, he just got lucky and then set up a Patreon.
Yeah.
I think that's the note we're going to leave it on. Duxie, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you
And
so
you,
much.
mate. Yeah, really good chatting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, I should also say like and subscribe because this
Oh
is
yeah,
it helps other people find us, and that is fun for us. I'm not as good at this stuff as Nima, but that's fine. Right, bye everyone.
Yep.